A woman dances until she dies, and no one knows why. A lighthouse empties out overnight, 3 men gone without a trace. The sun tears itself from the sky in front of 70,000 witnesses. History is full of moments science still can't explain, and today, we're covering 9 of them. Throughout history, there are events that defy easy explanation. Moments recorded by witnesses, investigated by scientists, and documented in official records, yet never fully understood. Some left behind physical evidence: flattened forests, strange footprints, unexplained wounds. Others left only testimony. Thousands of eyewitnesses describing the same impossible thing. Governments investigated. Scientists ran tests. Historians combed the records. And in every case, the same conclusion: no definitive answer. These are 9 of history's most compelling unsolved mysteries. Real events, real witnesses, and questions that remain unanswered to this day. In July 1518, Frau Trophäa stepped into a Strasbourg street and began to dance. She did not stop. Neighbors watched, confused, then alarmed, as hours became days. Within a week, dozens joined her. Their feet bled through worn shoes. Their faces showed exhaustion, not joy. Still, the dancing continued day and night without pause. City officials, believing movement was the cure, hired musicians and cleared guild halls. They hoped the afflicted would dance the fever out of their bodies. Instead, the numbers grew. By August, hundreds danced through Strasbourg streets. Some collapsed from exhaustion. Others suffered strokes or heart failure. Physicians watched helplessly, unable to explain what gripped their patients. Desperate, authorities turned to faith. They carried dancers to a shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus, patron of those said to suffer from compulsive movement. There, in the shrine's dim light, the dancing finally began to ease. By September, the epidemic had run its course, leaving Strasbourg shaken and searching for answers. Historians have long debated its cause. Some point to ergot, a toxic mold on damp rye that can trigger hallucinations and spasms in those who eat it. Others see a mind driven to its breaking point, stress, famine, and fear manifesting as involuntary movement. 5 centuries later, the truth behind the dancing plague remains unresolved. On June 30th, 1908, dawn broke quietly over the Siberian taiga near the Podkamennaya Tunguska River. Few witnesses stood close enough to see what came next. A blinding flash split the sky, followed by a deafening blast. Reindeer herders miles away were thrown from their feet by the force. The explosion flattened trees across 830 square miles. 80 million trees fell outward in a radial pattern, pointing away from a single center. Scientists later calculated the blast's power at nearly 1,000 times the Hiroshima bomb. Yet no crater marked the ground where it struck. Windows shattered hundreds of miles away. Seismic stations across Europe and Asia recorded the shock wave, though few understood its source at the time. For over a decade, no expedition reached the remote site. Political upheaval and the region's isolation delayed serious investigation. In 1927, Soviet scientist Leonid Kulik led the first research team into the area. He found devastation, but no impact fragments or meteorite remains. Kulik's findings deepened the mystery. Without a crater or debris, the true cause of Tunguska remains one of history's most debated unresolved events. In the late Bronze Age, the Mediterranean world flourished. Powerful kingdoms traded, built monuments, and maintained armies across a connected network of civilizations. The Hittite Empire ruled Anatolia. Mycenaean Greece thrived on trade and warfare. Egypt, under its new kingdom pharaohs, stood as the region's dominant power. Then, within a few short decades, this world collapsed. Cities burned. Palaces were abandoned. Entire civilizations that had stood for centuries simply disappeared. Egyptian records from the reign of Ramesses III describe a great threat arriving by sea and land, one no previous power had faced. The pharaoh called them the Sea Peoples, a coalition of seafaring warriors and their families, traveling in ships and ox-drawn carts. Temple inscriptions at Medinet Habu describe fierce battles. Egypt claimed victory, but the cost was severe. Other kingdoms were not so fortunate. The Hittite Empire vanished entirely. Mycenaean palaces burned and were never rebuilt. Trade routes that once connected the Mediterranean fell silent. Who the Sea Peoples truly were and where they came from remains unknown. Their origins are one of archaeology's most enduring mysteries. On the night of February 8, 1855, snow fell heavily across Devon, England. By morning, residents woke to something no one could explain. A single line of hoof-like prints stretched across the snow-covered landscape. They wound through towns, fields, and forests in an unbroken path. The tracks measured just 2 to 4 inches wide, spaced 8 inches apart, as if made by one small, determined creature walking on 2 legs. The trail stretched for an estimated 40 to 100 miles, an astonishing distance for a single night's journey by any known animal. The prints crossed open meadows and frozen rivers without pause. They climbed over rooftops and walked straight across the tops of high garden walls. In some places, the tracks approached solid walls and continued on the other side, as though nothing had blocked their path at all. Local clergy and newspapers reported the phenomenon widely. Some residents refused to leave their homes, believing the devil himself had walked among them. Investigators proposed explanations, from escaped kangaroos to hopping mice, but no theory fully matched the tracks. The mystery of Devon's footprints endures today.
On October 13, 1917, nearly 70,000 people gathered in a muddy field near Fatima, Portugal. They came expecting a miracle. Months earlier, 3 shepherd children claimed the Virgin Mary appeared to them, promising a sign on this date that would prove their visions true. Rain fell steadily that morning, soaking the crowd. Pilgrims, skeptics, and journalists stood together, waiting, umbrellas raised against the grey October sky.
Wow,
Then, witnesses said, the rain stopped. The clouds parted suddenly, and the sun appeared, visible and pale enough to look at directly. The sun began to spin, witnesses claimed, casting multicolored light across the crowd and landscape. Reds, blues, and yellows swept over the field. Suddenly, many reported, the sun seemed to break from the sky and zigzag downward, plunging toward the crowd before stopping and returning upward. The event, later called the Miracle of the Sun, lasted about 10 minutes. Thousands, including journalists from secular newspapers, described witnessing the phenomenon. No observatory anywhere in the world recorded any solar anomaly that day. What tens of thousands saw at Fatima remains scientifically unexplained. On December 19, 1900, a relief ship approached the Flannan Isles, a remote outcrop off Scotland's northern coast. Something was wrong. No flag flew from the lighthouse mast. No keeper appeared on the rocks to greet the arriving boat, as protocol always required. When the crew finally landed, they found the lighthouse silent and empty. James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur were nowhere to be found. Inside, the lamps stood clean and ready for lighting. The clock had stopped. A chair lay overturned on the kitchen floor. The keeper's oilskins and boots remained, though weather records showed a fierce storm had struck the islands only days before. The lighthouse logbook held a final, unsettling clue. Entries stopped abruptly, with strange notes mentioning wind and rough seas from days before the last visit. Investigators searched the island and surrounding waters, but found no trace of the 3 men. No bodies were ever recovered. Officials concluded a rogue wave likely swept the keepers from the rocks. Yet without witnesses or remains, the truth of Flannan Isles remains unresolved. In late 1991, residents of Taos, New Mexico began reporting something strange. A low, persistent hum, like a distant diesel engine, disturbed their nights. The sound was described as faint but constant, felt more than heard by some. Sleep grew difficult. Headaches and irritability followed for many. Word spread through the small town. Neighbors compared symptoms, surprised to learn others experienced the same unexplained, droning noise. Local and national media picked up the story. The phenomenon became known as the Taos hum, drawing curiosity from across the country. Congress took notice. In 1993, researchers from the University of New Mexico and Los Alamos National Laboratory launched a formal investigation. Scientists placed sensitive microphones and seismic equipment throughout Taos, monitoring for any unusual acoustic or vibrational signals in the environment. The equipment detected nothing unusual. No abnormal frequencies were recorded, despite continued reports from residents who insisted the hum was real. Only a small percentage of Taos residents, roughly 2%, report hearing the sound. Its source or explanation remains unidentified to this day. On March 3, 1876, near Olympia, Kentucky, Mrs. Allen Crouch stood in her yard on a clear afternoon, doing ordinary chores. Without warning, flakes of fresh meat began falling from a clear sky. They landed across her property, scattering over more than 100 yards. The fall lasted only a few minutes. Witnesses described irregular pieces, ranging from small flakes to chunks the size of a hand. Two local men, Harrison Gill and B. Ellington, tasted samples of the fallen flesh. They reported it resembled venison. Others said mutton. News of the strange event spread quickly, reaching newspapers across the country. Scientists and curious readers alike demanded an explanation. The Kentucky State Medical Association analyzed preserved samples. Their findings identified the tissue as lung and muscle matter, animal in origin. Researchers proposed a theory. A large flock of buzzards flying overhead may have regurgitated their recent meal in unison. No flock was seen that day, and the theory was never confirmed. The true cause of the Kentucky meat shower remains unexplained. On May 26, 1828, a young man appeared in the streets of Nuremberg, Germany. He moved unsteadily, unfamiliar with the world around him. He carried a letter addressed to a cavalry captain. His speech was limited to a few disjointed phrases, and he seemed unable to answer basic questions. Authorities took him in, calling him Kaspar Hauser. He claimed to have spent his entire life alone in a small, dark cell. Hauser said he was given only bread and water, and never saw another human being until his sudden release onto the city streets. His case drew widespread attention. Scholars, nobles, and curious citizens debated his origins, some suspecting royal secrets, others believing him a fraud. Over the following years, Hauser learned to speak and write, living under the care of guardians who studied his behavior and history closely. In December 1833, Hauser stumbled home with a knife wound to his chest. He claimed a stranger had attacked him in a park. 3 days later, Hauser died from his injuries. His true identity and the reasons behind his mysterious life were never confirmed.